Hi friends, welcome to Calm in the Chaos Homeschool. If you're new here, my name is Davine and I homeschool 4 kids ages 10, 11, 12, and 14. They are going to be going into 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade next year. So today's topic is what I wish I knew about homeschooling before I started homeschooling. So we have just completed our 3rd year of homeschooling, so I can think back to the time before we started homeschooling and some of the things that I did not realize or things that I didn't know before I started homeschooling. Today's video, I think, is going to be very helpful for people who perhaps have not started homeschooling yet and they plan on starting homeschooling, as well as it's just going to be fun to catch up with some of you who do follow my channel, and we can just have chats about what surprised us when we started homeschooling, or what did we think homeschooling would be like, and then what are we finding it to be like right now. I would love for this video to be a 5 things I wish I knew about homeschooling video, but I don't think it's going to be that way. I have jotted down some notes about some things that I wish I knew, or things that kind of surprised me when I first started homeschooling. So I have some notes, but it's going to be just much more of a conversation. And I would love to hear from all of you who are watching this video. What are some things that you wish you knew about homeschooling before you started? Maybe it will help out some people who are looking to start in the fall. I'm sure they have some apprehension going into homeschooling. It is a big life change, and I'm just going to share some of the things that I've learned in the past 3 years about homeschooling. Before I go too far into this, I do want to say that this video is a collaboration hosted by myself and Shauna from Homegrown Homeschool. There will be a playlist in the description box below with a bunch of moms who are joining in on this collaboration, making their own videos about things that they wish they knew before they started homeschooling. So if you are new to homeschooling, that would definitely be a great playlist to check out. So before I want to go through some of the things that I wish I knew about homeschooling before I started homeschooling myself, I do want to share that I was personally homeschooled from 1st to 11th grade. My parents were missionaries and we grew up in Taiwan, and my parents did not want to send me away to boarding school. So that was pretty much the best option, other than going to a school in Taiwan, which really was very educationally different than my parents' background, and that's just not the environment they wanted me in. So I was homeschooled sort of out of necessity. I was definitely homeschooled a lot differently than I am homeschooling my kids. That being said, that was 20, 30 years ago. So homeschooling was a little different back then. So jumping forward to me and my kids, I was open to the idea of homeschooling theoretically. However, I did not feel like I could homeschool my kids when it came down to it. My kids, I have 4 adopted kids, and there's a lot of trauma and things that just make it a little harder, I think. And I just kind of felt like the school system was better set up to deal with the special needs that my kids have. And I really just thought that that was probably the best place for my kids, along with I didn't think that I could homeschool most of my kids. I won't say all of my kids, but most of my kids, I did not feel like it would be a good situation if I were to do that. I know that a lot of new or people looking into homeschooling can relate to that. It's a very common feeling that it would be really hard to teach your own kids. So I was there. We started homeschooling, like I said, 3 years ago. My kids were going into 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade at that time. Everyone knows what was happening back in 2020. And essentially, when my kids got sent home from school, March of 2020, basically, our school system shut down till the end of the school year. I started taking on their education a little bit more. Because my kids have special needs, I knew that it would be a challenge for the teachers to send home the right fit for my kids as far as stuff they should do. And so the teachers were very understanding when I sort of started doing my own thing. In addition to my background is I actually do have a degree in education. That's what I was doing before I started adopting kids. I was a teacher and I have actually taught for years and years and years. So there's a little bit of irony for you, a teacher who didn't feel like she could teach her own kids. I do want to say that having a teaching degree does not qualify me in any way more than any other homeschool mom who really wants to homeschool her children. Teaching degree is about classroom management, which might be helpful because I have 4 kids very close in age. But really, I think it's just the temperament that drew me to become a teacher is helpful as a homeschool mom, and especially with the kids that have the needs that my kids have. They need a lot of structure, and so it's very easy for me to bring the right amount of structure into our homeschool. That's just how I'm wired more naturally, and it really just does work with my specific kids. Homeschools can be so different, and just because I do something one way doesn't mean it's wrong, and it doesn't mean that it is the only way to do it. So back to my story. My kids were sent home 2020 March, and I started realizing that even though, of course, I was in charge of teaching my kids all day and being home with my kids all day, which is something I wasn't used to, it wasn't harder than when I was sending my kids to school, because a lot of my kids were having trouble in school. And so I was dealing with a lot of the problems that they were having at school, and then I was dealing with a lot of the emotions and things that came home from school. And so our mornings were stressful trying to get them to school. Our evenings were stressful because they had just had a full day of school and just the influences that were there. So that's my first thing that I wanted to share with you, is that I'm not going to say homeschooling is easy. It is not. It is not easy. It does not take away stress. You are home with your kids all day long, and there are ways to manage that and to find time for yourself. There are ways. I do have videos about that. But the surprising thing was, even though I'm with my kids more, it doesn't make it harder to parent them. In fact, I will say for me, it has made things overall easier. Along with that, you do have so much more control of your life when you are not stuck on the public school schedule. You may not realize how much stress there is in that paperwork that comes home, those random days that they have where you have to dress up, and you don't have control of when those things happen. As a homeschool parent, you can do fun things with your kids, but you are in control of your schedule. You are in control of when is best for you guys to start school, to end school, how much to do, what days to do. It is so hard to even explain the amount of freedom that you get when you take that public school education out of the equation. And that is something I did not realize when I signed up for homeschooling, how many stressful things did get taken off of my plate. I will say some other things do get added to my plate. However, those things bring me a lot more joy than dealing with the public school system. So that is the main first thing that I wanted to share with you, and how different homeschooling has been versus having my kids in public school. I did not realize what it could be like. So that was a few things, a few of the fears I had. I was afraid that I couldn't do it. I was afraid that I would not be able to manage my emotions. And I'm going to say I'm not perfect at that. But with the kids being more calm, with our life being more calm, with me being able to be in more control of our schedule and what we do and how we do it, what curriculum we're using, how long we spend doing everything, the kids' anxiety and emotions are calmer as well. So that makes it easier to deal with my kids when I'm with them all day homeschooling them. So that's another thing that I was not aware of when I first started homeschooling. A tip that my friend gave me before I started homeschooling, and I think I did listen to her, maybe not to the extent that I should have. She told me to start slow. Don't go jump in, try to do a full day schedule on the first day or even the first week or anything like that. That has been some of the best advice that I've gotten as far as starting a homeschool year. I would go to say that I recommend, if you are starting homeschooling, start with the bare minimum. Like, you do not have to plan all the extras right away. Start with the basics. Start with math, reading, language arts, those things, and get those things figured out first. Get those things put into your schedule, and then you can slowly add some of the extra stuff that your kids might need. Of course, this depends on the age of your children. If your children are like, I would say 3rd, 4th grade and below, really just start with math and language arts. If they're a little bit older, maybe you want to add science and social studies, or really, if you don't, that's okay too. High school is when you really have to probably have a little bit more, but you can also do that slowly. You can stagger it in, because you can start and stop homeschooling whenever you want, really, as long as it fits in your state guidelines. So I would suggest, and this is what I sort of did, try to stay to the basics, and then you can add on the extra stuff as you start building your systems and your routines and just the way your homeschool is going to be. I definitely try to go a little bit too strong in general, and I suggest that you don't. So that is something that my friend told me really early on, and I'm glad I kind of listened to her advice, because it was not long before I realized how important that was. So I would say it usually takes us about 2 to 3 weeks before we're really going on pretty full steam ahead. And yeah, and I think this is going to relate to my next point. There are so many options when it comes to homeschooling, as far as curriculum, as far as styles. There are a lot of options, and it can be really overwhelming. So that is why I suggest that you start very basic. Get the things that are going to work best for you, the very basics started, before you start trying to add new things. As far as the options are endless, I have also found that managing a homeschool schedule can be a bit challenging at times, because there are so many social opportunities in our area anyways. I think it does depend on where you live and how many other homeschoolers there are. I don't think that we live in a huge homeschooling area. I think it's pretty average. We don't live in a huge city, but we also don't live out in farmland. So we're kind of in the suburbs of a small town, and then kind of close to a small city. So even with that, there are so many options of things to do with other homeschoolers if you really look. So if you're worried about socialization, I would say if you are not crazy introverted yourself, I'm an introvert, but I am a social introvert. I do like to hang out with other people. So I do go and seek out opportunities for my kids and myself to have that community. And it is really important as a homeschooling parent to find that community, whether it be in person, of course, would be ideal. It can be online. It can be just watching other YouTube videos from moms who are homeschooling. I find that very helpful. But I don't find the problem to be not having enough opportunities to socialize. I was surprised at how much I started to actually guard my home time in my homeschooling, because we do have a lot of fun. We have friends who we can hang out with. We have nature groups we can go to. There's like meetups at like trampoline areas where you can meet up with other homeschool moms. There's so many options, and I really had to be careful about the commitments that I made as far as weekly or bi-weekly or monthly commitments I made to go out and be social. That is not our problem in our homeschool. Our problem is having enough time at home to do the things that I feel are really important for my kids' learning. So if you're worried about socialization, I'm going to say it has not been a problem for us. I do have a variety as far as my kids. I have a super social child who really needs a lot more social, and then I have like the introvert who really doesn't want to go out very much. But we've been able to pretty much keep everyone happy as far as the socialization goes, just throughout the year with various activities and various meetups that we sign up for. Another thing that took me a while to wrap my mind around was that it does not matter what grade or level your child is at. I gotta shift. Oh, my feet are falling asleep. So What I mean by that is your child is where they're at. There's no amount of trying to force them to be at the grade level or whatever that you think they should be at. They are where they're at. And the best place to teach them is to teach them from where they are at and work up from there. I do know now that also getting a kid caught up is not really maybe necessarily a good thing either, because there's a lot of pressure on the child, on you, to try to make that child learn things that they might not be ready for. So when you start homeschooling, one of the things that, even as a homeschooled kid myself, because I was always kind of on grade level, so that wasn't a problem for me, but my kids are either exceeding or significantly, I would say, below grade level in different areas. And of course, as a homeschool mom, my goal was to catch them up, right? Get them caught up to where they should be. But that is not really super helpful. If your child is learning, they are where they should be. If they're learning at their own pace, that is how it's supposed to be. The school system is not the best system as far as having children be where they should be at, as far as every child develops differently. And it's okay if your child is working below grade level in one area or working above grade level in another area. Your job as the homeschool mom is to find where they're at and meet them there and work at their pace. So that was something that took a little bit of time for me. I think just coming out of more of I had a public school mindset, even though I was homeschooled, that my kids needed to be at grade level or at least close, try to get them as close as possible. But as I'm watching them learn and grow, I just see what they have learned, and I can celebrate where they have come from and not be so concerned about what grade level they're at. So another concern that I had going into this, because I was pretty sure once we started homeschooling, I was pretty sure that this was going to be a permanent thing. That's how different our life was based on just that short 3 months between March and June of 2020. I could just see that this was a better way for my kids. So I was thinking about high school, and I didn't really know what to do about high school. I was worried because my oldest, she is now going into 8th grade, so we're not quite in high school yet, but I was worried about what would happen when we got to high school. I couldn't really see her doing high school level work, especially at the beginning of high school, and I did not know how that worked with homeschooling. So since then, I have learned that once a child is high school age, so that's usually 14, when they would be going into that 9th grade year, anything that they do at their level is considered high school. So you can still customize their curriculum. Of course, you're trying to challenge your children, but not so much that they get frustrated, so much that they're learning. And so anything that you do at that age is high school, and you can give credits for that. There are some guidelines as far as how many hours they should be doing. And there's some guidelines as far as if they do that credit earlier, what would be considered high school. So if they're doing stuff in 7th grade or 8th grade, what might be considered high school stuff. So really, in my mind, if they are younger than that 9th grade year, then if they're doing high school coursework, then yes, they can get the credit. But if they are not ready for that, once they hit 9th grade, whatever level that you decide they are at, that will work towards a high school credit. So the person who really talked to me about that and explained that to me was my friend. She was telling me, if your daughter is not at grade level and she hasn't been at grade level and she won't be at grade level when she comes to high school, she has an IEP, so then her schoolwork would not be the same as the average child who's on grade level, because even in the public school system, they can't force a child who's not ready to do the work to do it, and they still graduate these kids. So that was something that took a while for me to wrap my brain around. On the subject of high school and things like that, another thing that I wish I knew earlier that I did not realize about homeschooling is once you start homeschooling your kid, I feel like you take on that added responsibility of educating your child. I'm sure there's parents out there who have children who they send to public school and they take a super active role in their education, and they're always looking for the best opportunities for their children. I feel like I was, yes, of course I cared about my children's education, but I kind of said, oh, here, they're at public school. Public school knows what they're doing. They have their specialists, and so their education is going to be fine. It's taken care of. Once I started homeschooling my children, I started to be a lot more aware of what they needed to learn, their talents, their abilities, their struggles, their strengths, and I'm much more able to envision what they might be able to do in the future. And as a homeschool parent, you have so much more time to customize their education to not only meet their weaknesses and help build where they are weak, but also help their strengths and help them to grow in their strengths. You have just so much more time when you're a homeschool parent versus a parent who only sees their children before and after school and during summer break. So I'm gonna say that I feel like my kids are going to be better prepared for their future, better prepared for their adult life because I started homeschooling. And I do want to add that I'm not saying that you have to homeschool forever and there's never a situation where public school, private school, alternative education scenario is the best for your child. That could happen, but I feel like once you start homeschooling, you just start to look at your options, and homeschooling is one of those options on how your child can develop and grow, and you're always looking at what are some other options. Is there another better way for my child? Your mind is just opened up, and I think you're taking more of an active role in your children's education. Yeah, that's just something that I realized about myself when I started homeschooling. So this is a pretty long video. Thank you so much for sticking around. If you stuck around till this point, I would love to hear from you. What are some things that you're either concerned about if you're new to homeschooling, you're concerned about in going into homeschooling, or what were some things that you wish you knew before you started homeschooling, or things that you were surprised by when you started homeschooling? Those are some of the things that I have learned since I've started homeschooling. And I definitely am so glad that our family went on this adventure and journey. We do struggle. It is a struggle sometimes. Yeah, homeschooling can be really, really hard sometimes, and it can get very tiring, but it's so worth it. We have so much more time together as a family. I know my kids so much better. Just a lot of wonderful things have come from homeschooling. So don't forget to check the playlist below to see what all the other moms wish they knew before they started homeschooling. If you're new to homeschooling, I will also link below a playlist of my How to Start Homeschooling playlist that will walk you through some of the steps, some of the things that you might want to think about as you are going on this journey. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I hope to see you in my next video. Bye, everyone.